Hey folks, this is Steve. I am on Zoom with Rosenna Bakari. She has a PhD in educational psychology and she has started her own nonprofit. And that nonprofit is at talkingtreesurvivors.com. She's actually the author of a recently published, by the time this podcast goes on the air, recently published book called Too Much Love Is Not Enough. It's a memoir of silence and childhood sexual abuse. And we're going to talk with her about the nonprofit she's starting and the steps she's taking to make that nonprofit her source of income, her job. She's taking that step, folks, and this is going to be a great conversation. So, Rosenna, thanks so much for being on the program.
Thank you. I appreciate the time to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, this is great. So it's interesting. You have a PhD in educational psychology. So did you get to start like teaching and things like that, or is it like doing that at
Yes.
schools and universities?
When I graduated from the University of Northern Colorado in 2000, I went into higher education. And so I spent the last 16 years teaching at private institution, public institution, and most recently community college, teaching psychology.
Mm. And then now starting this nonprofit. Now the nonprofit was founded in 2010. So
Correct.
That's 8 years, but it's still relatively new. Now, was that in the back of your head for a long time? Is it something that came out later on, like through some type of job dissatisfaction? Like, how did that idea come about and the starting of that happen?
So this is interesting. I hope we're going to jump ahead a little bit because it's so intertwined. So
Right.
First of all, my degree is in educational psychology because I didn't want to go into clinical psychology because I did not ever want to have anything to do with adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse.
Right.
So when I was looking into my PhD programs, it's like, what can I do and avoid ever having contact with survivors again? Let me go into education because I really do love the field of psychology. I love the entire field of psychology. But the last time I had a job counseling, I had been triggered and literally could not work with adult survivors. And so I was really avoiding that path when I earned my degree in educational psychology. So living in denial, doing my best to live in denial for decades. In 2007, I started having triggers again and a whole bunch of stuff happening. And I decided like I had to live openly. Like the only way I was going to get out of this was to start living openly. And so I did. I started the slow process of talking to people, trying to find resources. What was frustrating is that the best resources that I found were in research journals, which was really helpful for me.
Right.
I mean, hugely like life-saving helpful for me to sort things out, try to put together some pieces. And so by the time I did all that, that took a couple of years. And I'm a writer. I'm a poet writer, not just a writer, but I'm a poet. So as I started to sort things out and really get myself together enough to sort of create a picture of what I thought healing should look like for me, it occurred to me, like, what do everybody else do? What are these survivors doing? They have nothing. The first number that struck me was that there are 40 million adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse.
Right.
That was in 2010. It's closer to 60 million now. So I'm like, there are 40 million adult survivors. Where are they? Why are we so isolated? And if there are 40 million survivors, why do I feel so alone in this process when there are 40 million people who have similar experiences? I couldn't get that number out of my head. So eventually I created Talking Trees because I wanted to go on this search to try to gather these survivors to support each other. Because I know that what happens is that when survivors start to heal and start to find their voice, it requires separation from family. And that was the phase where I was in, separating more and more from family as I found my voice. And so I thought, well, that's silly. They have 40 million people who have to be isolated because they're trying to heal their lives and they don't have each other. That just didn't make sense to me. So I created Talking Trees for one, survivors to find each other, thus my platform for calling on survivors was to live openly, because why did we not find each other? Because everybody was hiding like me.
Right.
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 If everybody's hiding, you never find each other. And so I wanted a platform where survivors could grow into the process of living openly and find each other. But also, I wanted a platform because I did have a PhD. I did have an advanced martial arts. I did have a background in religion and spirituality and all these things, that I felt very qualified to bring all these pieces together to try and talk about what the healing path felt like, could be like, what resources were necessary. I wanted to take what I was finding in the research journals and put it in plain language where other survivors can have access to that same information. Right.
Right.
And so that's how I created Talking Trees in 2010. I started with a play called Talking Trees, about living in silence of childhood sexual abuse. What became very clear to me on the healing path was that the trauma itself, the actual physical trauma that comes along with sexual abuse, was one part of the trauma, but the trauma that I was currently living didn't have so much to do with the act of sexual abuse. It had to do with the silence of sexual abuse, like the pain that I was currently experiencing, the shame, the guilt, the hush hush, the buying gifts for violators. Like that was all about the silencing of the abuse, and not so much the abuse itself.
Right. And so you started this in 2010. Now I can't imagine you can't talk to family, and for those, a lot of people maybe can't afford therapy, so they're not going to
Right.
go to a therapist, right? And the only research you could find was research papers, which is really not accessible to the everyday person. I mean, you were getting your PhD and stuff, so that made sense to you and helped. So it seems like you created something that was really needed at that time. Um,
Right.
with everyone living in silence, how do you find the people, or how do they find you? How do you get them to come to the group, to your website, and be part of this community? I mean, you talk, there's outreach, right? I may have a kid with autism, or I may have a kid with cerebral palsy, or I may have whatever nonprofit, insert nonprofit here, mission. And a lot of times those are out there and known, and they can market and they can do stuff with sexual abuse and incest and things like that. It's not something that is not a dinner table conversation. You don't see commercials for it. It, like you said, people are hiding, they're in the shadows on this. How do you reach that audience? Let's just start with the audience of the survivors, right? The people who have experienced this. How did you find them, or they find you?
Well, I all of my platforms are online. We do have an annual conference, but even at the annual conference, the people come who are online, and those numbers are very small. Again, especially when you consider that there's at that time 40 now to 60 million adult survivors. Of course, not everybody who has had that experience is traumatized. Okay, but we also know that only half the survivors ever tell anyone.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you do? How do you have that outreach? So my work has been largely online and international. I've always marketed, if I boost a post or something, I do that outside of the country. I do that internationally. So about close to a third, about 6,000 members live outside of the United States. Quite a few in Canada, Australia. I vacationed in Australia a couple of years ago. Actually got to meet two of my members that I'd
Right.
only known online. So it's real cool when you get to do those things. But the growth has been slow and largely word of mouth. Of course, the more sophisticated social media becomes, the easier the task becomes. But it's really difficult. So every now and again, we get a boost with things like a We Too movement, or something is happening in the news, and people are triggered and start looking for resources and find us.
Mm-hmm.
But we have 6,000
Mm-hmm.
members. There are 6 million
Right.
survivors.
What is that,
That's
1% that you have?
less than a drop in a bucket.
Yeah.
Less than a drop in a bucket. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to, at this point in time, I thought it would be necessary for me to write the book, my own memoir, because it can have further reach than people finding me online. And
Right.
so even that has taken a lot of work, and that's part of that has become part of my financial investment
Mm-hmm.
into the nonprofit organization, right? Because I had to find some way to raise funds, and two, I had to, in the way that you're going to raise funds is going to be connected to how many people you're reaching. And so not just from a personal standpoint, but from a financially fit, thriving attempt to have a nonprofit, writing the book became a necessary thing to do at this time.
Right. And I guess like being online is actually pretty helpful in some sense, because if I want to keep my privacy, and it's, it is definitely a topic that people aren't just going out there and talking about in public all the time. So an online community seems like a really good way to approach it, because people can do it in their own privacy, on their own terms, at their own pace.
Exactly.
So that you came about at the right time. Like 20 years ago, this couldn't have been done. That just wouldn't have
No, I
happened.
looked for it 20 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. Now, how do people? I want to know a little bit more about like the structure of being a member, right? So, if I'm a survivor of sexual abuse of some way in my past, I come to your site. I am becoming a member of a group through Facebook. Am I a member? Am I paying dues? How is your structure for your nonprofit in that sense?
We try to do everything free that's possible. We charged $30 for one of the conferences because we had to charge something. But other than that, and then of course the books cost anywhere from $9 or cheaper than that actually for ebook, probably $3 for an ebook to up to $25. But one of the my concerns, as you said before, a lot of survivors don't have financial resources, and we shouldn't. My frustration was, how much more do we have to keep paying for someone else's crime? And so I'm always very concerned about what we have to offer and what it costs for survivors to be involved. That being said, so the websites are free, the videos on YouTube are free, the Facebook community is free. Now there are some caveats to that though. My whole purpose was to support survivors in living openly. So not only are they free, they're also open sites and resources, because there's so much shame that people have to work through, that people come in at different levels. Some people actually create different profiles just to
Mhm.
read the links, the posts. They don't want anyone to see that they have anything to do with this. So if they hear about the site, they'll literally create another profile just to access the site because it's an open site.
Right.
So some people, of course, come in as they are, but just never make comments or never post. So my goal was to have a platform where people can do that. I never wanted to tell people this is what you have to do to heal. So what I write every day, and I do write every day, have been doing that for years. Um, I want to encourage, challenge, uncover what issues that we don't always want to face and deal with. Like, just because we have feelings don't mean that they are correct. Right? That sort of stuff,
Right.
coming to terms with that some of our feelings are about trauma. Yes, we also then have to learn how to live instinctively, but living instinctively works best if your instincts match the environment that you're in. You grow up in a dysfunctional environment of conflict, and those are the instincts that you develop, then they
Right.
don't serve you as well when you are not in
When
that
you're an
environment.
adult and you may
So
be holding some
so
emotion,
our
but yeah.
so our so our resources are free, but they are also open. One of the advantages, there's two advantages to that. One, it helps streamline our focus in a group. So in a Facebook page, and we do Facebook because people can access Facebook from all over the world, unlike a website. So it helps us streamline the conversations. When people know that anybody can read it, we still come in, people still talk about being not having contact with their families. People still talk about, well, yes, I had 3 victims. People still talk about those, make comments about the abuse, but they're streamlined. People don't come in and spill everything, as we sometimes say, vomit the
Mhm.
abuse all over the place. and for everybody to see. When people know that this is about growing your life of living open, people become much more conscious about how they see the abuse themselves and relate to the abuse themselves. Because the other thing that's important is that we begin to have a way to talk about the abuse that's effective, that engages people, not turn people off for the wrong reasons. There are always people that are going to be turned off, but we don't want conversation that consistently turn people off just because we haven't learned how to dialogue about it. So that's one of the advantages of having being an open community, because we want to talk about it openly. So this is where we get to practice talking about it openly in a way that becomes constructive. The other reason is that because it's open, you don't have to register, you don't have to put your email, you don't have to do anything. You as a survivor can come in and out as you want. You get to control your own healing program process with Talking Trees as your supporter. We don't take anything from you. You get to engage in it exactly how it benefits you.
So it's somewhat innovative in what you're doing. The technology's there now, and you're getting a topic now that, like you said, there's movements going on with the Me Too and things like that. So stuff that was hidden isn't hidden as much anymore, and people are feeling more comfortable saying this, Me Too, this happened to me in some way. What are you learning from this, in the sense that you have an idea for your platform, stuff like that, and it's a somewhat new approach in how you're kind of developing this community that's open and safe, and you're allowing people to come in and out, and it's no expense. Do you have a strategic plan, an idea of how this program develops, of how this, because right now it's all free, and you're looking towards becoming sustainable. You want to be able to make this your living, and then you can devote more time to it, because then you don't have to have another job and that kind of stuff, right? Do you have a plan for that? What's your plan to take this to the level where it's somehow giving you some revenue so that you can go the next step? And what are those next steps?
So I'm very fortunate in timing. I believe the universe takes care of us. I've been in Colorado Springs for 18 months. And I joined the Center for Nonprofit Excellence here. And this is a place of entrepreneurship in Colorado Springs. This is also a place that we have a gazillion nonprofits. And so we do very innovative things here. So one of the things that's becoming that the Better Business Bureau is targeting businesses or to consider social enterprise. And so Talking Trees is a perfect model, I think, for social enterprise. So that's the conversation now. So right now we're 501c3, we're just a nonprofit. And that was okay because we weren't making a nonprofit. We were a real, literal nonprofit. Now that there has to be a profit made, if I'm going to continue to work with the passion, the degree of passion that I have currently, yes, how do I make a profit from that? So with the social enterprise, what happens is that I get to develop this profit organization, which for me right now is Caribou Publishing. All it does is publishing. It allows me to publish books, do consulting, do some other creative things to make the profit. So the for-profit business then supports the nonprofit.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I'm moving to. I don't know how that's going to look in the end, but that's the model that I'm moving toward. So with the book publishing, so right now, I don't publish books under Talking Trees. I publish books under Caribou Publishing. And
right.
Then so it all comes together. Because I don't ever want to charge survivors to be online or for membership. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to do that. And so that's one of the reasons why putting this together for me has been a slow process, because I want to figure out how to continue to do it creatively and not lose the innovation that I started with.
Right. So you're creating a social enterprise kind of model there. So, and that's going to be the publishing company. Do you expect to kind of have a series of books or something that comes out and stuff that are available through that company? And then tell us a little bit more about how that model is going to work. That just do all the profits go to the nonprofit, but by having a for-profit, you're a little freer to do things, or like, how does that work?
Exactly. So the Caribou Publishing, let's say, I can sell books. I can do consulting. I can have seminars all under that as a publisher, author, agent. That's
Mhm.
my for-profit. And then I have to abide by all the tax codes of a for-profit and
Mhm.
do that. So then the money that I take to that, I can take 10% and feed it into Talking Trees. I can take 50% and feed it into Talking Trees, but I get to be a profit organization first,
Mhm.
right? And I don't have to worry about all the red tape that goes along with being a nonprofit. What that means is that then I'm probably not going to qualify for many of the grants that want you to be that say, well, you already have a way to fund that. That's what you do. You're a social enterprise. To me, that's a good thing. I think one of the things that people don't recognize, I didn't recognize when I went into nonprofit, when I started doing a nonprofit full time, I didn't realize that grants only cover about 10% of the funding for nonprofits. So and you can't rely on them. And so there's so much vulnerability for nonprofits, so much vulnerability. And I don't want to run a nonprofit with that type of vulnerability.
Mhm.
What happened when I transitioned out, when I was still teaching and I created Talking Trees, piece of cake. I had every resource I needed to create a conference, to have seminars, and I can do it for free because the college will cover it, right? So that's why I could charge $30 for a conference or something like that, minimal fees, and have food there and speakers there and that sort of stuff. So I had all these resources that I needed. What I didn't have was the time to really dig in
Mhm.
and grow the organization.
Right.
When I
There's that.
left, that flipped.
Yeah.
So I now have all the time in the world, and that time has to now be spent on finding resources to do it.
Right. Right.
So right, and the social enterprise model, I'm hoping, will work
Mhm.
for creating revenue to put back into Talking Trees.
Right. Yeah. And I think that funding model, it's always organic and it changes every year with new programs or new funding or whatever comes available. Social enterprise is relatively new for the nonprofit sector, but it's becoming more popular as for-profit industries are seeing there's an advantage for them. You in your case, you're actually starting your own for-profit to do this. One of the cool things about social enterprise is that the for-profit is not limited by the mission. So you could be selling books on any topic, right? And you could have
Right,
conferences for anything. You can be making money in any way. You just could become a really good publishing company for books on psychology, period, or something. And you can still take those funds, whether it's mission related or not, because the for-profit can donate relatively freely to the nonprofit. Where the nonprofit, you wouldn't be able to have a book on uh, let me say autism or so whatever, something that's not really
exactly.
related to what's going on because it's not mission related. I guess you could, but you want to be mission related. And the
Right,
idea of, like you said, with grants are somewhat limiting because they're not going to be there every year. You can never count on them. They may pay for the startup of an entire program, but in 3 years the grant fizzles out or something like that, because they're not going to keep funding you. They want you to be sustainable. And your model though could actually help with the grants. If you show the grantors that, hey, we have 20% of our 20% of our revenue or funding comes from our own social enterprise. Look how sustainable we are. What we really need is this
right.
computer or something like that. You can leverage that. So it can actually really be an advantage to have a successful social enterprise going on, because then you can look how innovative we are. Look at our different sources of income. Um, now, do you do traditional stuff in this? Well, I guess traditional in the sense of like crowdfunding, fundraising, any type of donations like that to get funding at this point?
We have not. We have not done that. And so within the 18 months that I've been here, it's been so much transition and trying to figure out. And one of the things I said I wasn't going to do is that I didn't want to run out and go, oh, I need money, I need money, I need money, and not really be able to express that with clarity in what I was going to do, and be able to say, yes, this is exactly where I want Talking Trees to grow and do. And so trying to spend a lot of careful time thinking that through and then figuring out where I want to get those funding sources from, depending on what I want to do with those. So I didn't want to just like, I know I need money to run an organization, but I didn't want money to, and I don't ever want getting money to be the focus. Like I really want, like I have this unique opportunity. I'm fortunate. I don't have to earn my own living. My husband does that for us. So I'm fortunate. So I have all these unique things that I can bring to this platform and to this mission of creating voice for survivors. So I want to do it very carefully. I don't want to do it the way that I don't want to do it this way because that's how it's been done before. Like almost everything that I've created with Talking Trees has gone off track, from the whole Living Openly platform to the way that we create dialogue about ourselves as survivors, to being a real nonprofit and not trying to sell things to people. Those are identities I don't want to lose. I don't want to give up. So I've been really careful, probably overly protective about maintaining those things. And so that's one of the reasons why internally I felt like I need to figure out a way that I can support Talking Trees before I ask anyone else to support Talking Trees. Again, that's kind of off the beaten track. Like I want to invest in it. Like I needed to create a way that I could find sources to personally invest in it before I ask anyone else to invest in this. Again, that's different than what we're used to doing or seeing. But that's where I've been.
Well, in some ways, though, a lot of granting agencies these days are asking for, like, if you have a board of directors and you go to apply for a grant, a lot of them want to know what has the board donated to the nonprofit, and a lot of times they want to see that that's cash. They don't care about in time or in kind or volunteer stuff. They want to see that you put a reasonable amount of a meaningful amount of money. That could be $20, it could be $1,000, whatever meaningful is to the individual board member. But they want to see that investment in there. So it's a good approach to do. So now we're talking about support fiscally. What support do you have in with people? Like what kind of resources do you have helping you with this nonprofit? Your board of directors, your family, your volunteers. What does that infrastructure look like?
For me right now, it's been really pieced together. So I have lots of people who would join in and do a specific task. Because I'm at a place of growth in this transition, I'm not always clear what that looks like. So for example, the book launch, and because this is a topic that people are not used to addressing publicly, I don't have a lot of expertise to come in and say, yeah, do it this way. In fact, what I have often gotten is that people who are used to promoting nice things like children's programs give me advice that I know won't work. I'm like, do you remember what our topic is? Like, it's not going to get the same response.
Right. You can't sell cookies.
So a lot of it has been, and the advantage that I have had in this is that I came into Talking Trees as a member. I didn't come in as someone saying, hey, look at all these things I've accomplished, and I get to tell you what this should look like for you. I never did that. And so I've always said to members, I'm a member figuring this out. And as I figure it out and unfold it, we all benefit from that. Because one thing I'm really good at is articulating the process once I figure out the process. So as this process unfolds for me, I bring people in for oftentimes only that single piece that I figured out today or last week, or what we're going to need next week. And so I'm hoping, and remember that I'm trying to do all that while still give voice to survivors and have people used to hearing words like incest without cringing or not wanting to hear from me again, because that happens, right? Especially when you talk about living openly. Like even that word you talk about, living openly, people don't know what that means. So it's like, that means you're going to sit here and tell me about everything that somebody did to you. It's like, no, that's not really at all what living openly means. So trying to put all these pieces together. So for example, if I talk about living openly, I have enough people that have embraced the conversation enough that I can finally, after 18 months of being here, go out and talk to people about living openly, and people know, and people not feel threatened by that concept, right? At least in terms of me personally, they're not threatened by that. So tons of support there. Tons of support.
Right. And do you do some type of outreach? Do you go and do speaking anywhere? How are you getting the message out about the existence of your organization to either people locally or virtually?
Colorado Springs is a place where people do a lot of networking. I like a tremendous amount of networking because most people own their own businesses here. And so every room I walk in, and this has been the case for the last 7 years when I started living openly and created Talking Trees, one of the commitments to myself is that with my PhD and other things, accolades I've collected over my lifetime, I decided that every room that I walked in, I would walk in and represent the pain and not the power. Like that was my personal commitment. So I don't walk in a room and say, hi, my name is Rosenna and I'm an incest survivor. I don't do that. But as soon as I hear conversation that I think closes the door or leave out adult survivors, I speak. Like every room I go into, someone says something, oh, have you considered this? Have you considered that? Oh, anybody think about how that might impact survivors who are in this room? Because there are 20 of us here, and I can assure you I'm not the only one, right? So there's always ways I find that the issue can come up. And now people ask me, what do I do? It's like, I write books on healing childhood sexual trauma. And so the conversation comes up. Every room I talk about Talking Trees, or sometimes I just say I'm the executive director for Talking Trees, and people say, what's that? Glad you asked. But it takes a lot. It's one of the hardest transitions for me, having to do this full time, is the amount of personal PR work. And I'm sure that anyone who has started a nonprofit knows that you become the brand, right? That's really challenging for me. One, because I really am an introvert and don't always like to talk to people in general. Two, even when I talk to people, I don't want it to always be about childhood sexual abuse. Like, I don't want to have that conversation every single day, right? So, but sometimes if I get too saturated with it, I have to pull myself out for my own sanity and just not network for a week or a month. The nice thing about writing this book over the last 8 months has been that my networking has been really minimal. So I haven't had to keep that heavy engagement with people. So now I get to have the book and say, hey, this is what I do. And I don't have to constantly have that intense conversation with people. So yeah, I become the brand. And that's how it's been.
Yeah,
and I get more people. People believe in me, though. I got recognized in November last year by the Colorado Springs Business Journal for the work that I do with adult survivors. So, which is pretty impressive for the short amount of time that I've been in Colorado Springs. So people are listening, even if they don't always talk back. And that's one of the things I've had to trust in this journey, is that trust that people are listening. They're just not ready to speak. Remember, that's what your task is, creating voice for people who are not ready to speak. So you can't get frustrated that people aren't speaking. You know that. That's why you created this platform.
So let me ask you, do you have a board of directors that's working with you now? Do you have people on there? And so they have a role at some point. Have you sat down and do you see yourself in a year? Do you see yourself in 3 years? Do you have kind of that strategic plan, or at least a type of vision of where this is going in the next few years, and what's that look like?
We have a vision for where it's going, and it's still a loose board. One, because I really want to get the right people on there. I really want to get a person on there who loves doing marketing and doesn't mind marketing something like this, right? I really want to get the person who knows all the ins and outs of running an organization. that has been challenging, getting the right people who have the time, because Colorado Springs has a gazillion nonprofits. It's really difficult to, again, pull people in. Like, why would I want to be on a board for Talking Trees when I can be on a board for Junior Achievements, something everybody likes, right? Right. So it really takes the right kind of person. So I've pieced together board members who are passionate and support me. The other, and so we're still unfolding this thing. It's still pretty new. The reason why we haven't been exact about saying this is how we want to be in 5 years, because we've been so focused on how do we simply get the name Talking Trees out there. So that's what it's been for the last year. Talking Trees, Talking Trees. What is Talking Trees? Oh, who's in charge of Talking Trees? Oh, it's Talking Trees in Colorado Springs. So it's just been getting the buzz out about Talking Trees. So that's where our effort. Once people know and get Talking Trees, then it's going to be easier to say, okay, now that people know us, like us, respect us, what can we ask them for in the next 5 years? So that's what we are.
Yeah. That's the thing with nonprofits. You're kind of always juggling. You got to market, you got to outreach, you got to program development, you got to fundraise, you got to do your regular everyday bookkeeping and office stuff and filing your paperwork. There's enough to go around. A lot of it always seems to be going on at the same time. And so finding that balance, developing your board and finding some funds, and now you got a conference to do, or maybe you're having an event and all of it goes on at the same time. I don't think that ever stops.
Right.
One
and
thing
getting
I think,
help.
yeah.
One of the things I have been really good at, because my board still does run loosely, is that I've been really good at getting help. I go to the Center for Nonprofit Excellence. I just applied for a leadership program and got selected. So I'm in a leadership program. Like, no matter how passionate you are about something, doesn't mean passion only takes you but so far. Passion works really well when you've got that full-time job and you're just, putting this passion into a hobby. But passion in business may earn you your first dollar. It won't earn you your 5 figures or 6 figures.
Right.
So that was a lesson that I had to learn quickly too. Like, okay, this is serious. You need to find the people who can help you figure out how to do this.
Right. Yeah. And let me ask you, how do you find those people? There's nonprofits out there right now who are like, where do I find the right board members? How do I find board members? Are these friends and family, which can be a danger thing? Obviously, you want more than just friends and family. You need skilled people in there, not just passion, but they have to have a skill too. So how do you find those board members?
I was lucky, again, in Colorado Springs. We have the Center for Nonprofit Excellence, and they actually post for board members.
Oh.
So I've had a couple of people come to me that way. I got an internship last year, and I was so lucky. I had just joined the Center for Nonprofit Excellence. I didn't even know it had me listed in there yet. And I get this phone call from a student who said, "Oh, I need an internship for the summer. Do you have a position?" Oh, let me see. She gave me, I had her 20 hours a week for 8 weeks in a summer. Lifesaver. And she was fantastic. She was from Colorado College, and man, she was absolutely fantastic. And we still work together a little bit. Of course, she's trying to finish school. So, but she came from the Center for Nonprofit Excellence. I have a board member, a person I'm interviewing next week for board membership. She's same thing. She's like, "Oh, I saw your name. I see that you are looking for board members." Now, that doesn't happen a lot, but but if you have any organization that helps nonprofit organizations, like, find that organization. I didn't know it existed, right? But it probably exists in a lot of places where people don't know, because the only thing we're thinking about is our passion. And once we start thinking about the business, then we have to figure out, oh, what are the resources? I used to a small business development center. They give cheap or almost cheap workshops. Sometimes they're free, sometimes they're $10, sometimes they're $20. They have stuff on bookkeeping. They have stuff on social media management. They have, so find those organizations that are helping other organizations. And then I've seen on LinkedIn, I've seen job postings for board members on LinkedIn. That hasn't worked for me, but I've seen them. So in regular job placement on social media or other resources, you can actually post for board members.
Yeah, I like how you're saying not just for just board members, but going into the community and finding the resources that are available, because there's organizations there that do exist, right? For leadership programs, for board development, for like you said, you go to the small business place, and that certainly helps because small businesses are doing a lot of the things that nonprofits are doing. In fact, a nonprofit is a business in many sense, right? So that's something that we also have to remember, that we are running a business.
Right.
So you were fully employed at one point, and you left that to do this full time. How long ago did you leave?
December. I finished teaching December 2016. Right.
It's a year and a half ago.
Yes.
Is about right?
Yep.
Just under. Oh wow, that's great. Yeah. So how is that leap?
Again, I'm fortunate. I have a roof over my head. My husband takes care of bills, so I'm fortunate. And we're the people who are supposed to figure out what else we're supposed to do, not stay home and bake cookies, right? So I'm fortunate that way. So I don't have that stress. But although I haven't told him how much money I've sunk into talking trees yet. So so it's been great. I love having the time. The challenges is that I didn't know that I would sometimes feel isolated working at home. And so I have to make myself go out. Like when I'm writing and I'm not getting out the house and I realize, oh, it's been 4 days, I haven't seen another human being, So that's like, okay, what's going on in the networking world? What's going on in the small business world? Where do I need to be? Where are people gathering? And finding ways that you can give to those spaces too. One of the things that someone told me, and it took me aback when one of the first people that I met with here, and I was talking about, I'm getting going in Colorado Springs. This is what I have. This is what I'm trying to do. And this is what I need. And after talking to her about 15 minutes about what I thought I needed, she looked at me and she said, "What are you offering?" I was like, "What?" She said, "Yeah, like, what are you offering? Like, you have all these needs. What is it that you have to offer people?" I'm like, "Oh no, we're nonprofit. We save the world. We're gonna." She's like, "No, like you can't." And that was a trick question for me. Like I had to really think about it. Like, wow, like what am I offering? And I didn't know. I didn't know what I had to offer people. And so again, I had to get into the community and figure out what little things I could offer people. Oftentimes for me, it was simply showing up at people's events. People want people at their events. So when people constantly see you at other important events, then it gives the impression that you give a darn about something other than what your passion is. You're giving support. I didn't have a lot to give. I had support to give. So I started posting about other people's events online, right? I started showing up at other people's events. If people said they needed volunteers to help out their events, I volunteered. So I had to figure out like how I can show myself worthy for people to give a darn about what I was doing by first really showing the Colorado Springs community that I gave a darn about what they were doing. That was a real important piece that I really selfishly had not considered.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like that's a good question that they ask, and a lot of times businesses approach this different than nonprofits. But the idea of what problem am I solving here, or what solution am I offering by having this service or within our mission? And it's sometimes with nonprofits, it's so broad. It's hard to find like, well, we developed the widget that fixes this problem. Now, now you don't have to worry about mildew on your tiles. I can't even think of a product, right? But, those are really simple. But when you have a service, a lot of times it's like, well, it's hard to put that into just a 1-minute elevator speech of this is the problem we solve, and trying to figure out how that relates to the community and how it solves maybe a community issue is a trick, right? It's something that we just try to like, it's a good question. I do this. People like it. It's a service. What's it solving, right? And so that always comes down to one of the things in marketing they always say is, if you have a solution for something, like just think of someone typing in Google, how do I fix my widgets? And then there it is.
Right.
It's like, you solved the problem. Or how do I find this? You solved the problem. Or how do I eat healthy? What's a good diabetic recipe? There's a solution, right? And so there is a trick to that, to try to figure out what angle you can come about with what you're solving, right? And or how you're helping that problem. Think of what people would type into Google and the answer you would have for that. So that's always, especially with service organizations, that's a tough one to figure out. Hey, we're just about almost out of time here. I want to just keep going towards letting people know more about what you're doing here. Again, folks, it's talkingtreesurvivors.com. That's the website. And tell us a little bit about that site. If I go there, where am I joining somewhere? Or is it send me to a Facebook page? This is kind of the home base of your organization. So actually, I just pulled it up here. So kind of give people a visual walkthrough of what this looks like.
Right. So I'm going to tell you why it stands out. And again, this speaks to me going off the path of really trying to focus on servicing adult survivors. One of the things that you won't find on that page is a donate button, because it's for survivors. It's not for grantors, right? And it's not about asking money for or getting money for Talking Trees. It's a service organization. Talking Trees is a service organization. So you'll find information on there that survivors need, not that I need grantors to know to give me some money. And so there's an outreach page on there that has links to some of the videos. There's the We Too movement outline on there about the need for listeners. Of course, there's access to the books on there, but there's a page full of questions that survivors don't want to ask people. So the page is built for survivors who are looking for information about the plight of being a survivor, right? Things like, should I forgive? That question's on there, right? Am I crazy? How do I get help? What should I look for in a therapist? So it's targeted towards survivors who are actually looking for help.
And then there's no representation for like the nonprofit in any way on here, like be a board member or donate now or information for grantors. Okay, good. So you built it specifically for that survivor. So folks, it's a good site. It's you have very easy to navigate and with good information and links throughout it. So that's at Talking Trees Survivors. Now let's turn to your book. You have a book coming out. RosennaBakari.com, and folks, I'll have a link for that, so you don't have to worry about trying to spell all that out. Rosenna Bakari, though it's exactly how it's spelled exactly how it sounds. But actually, there's two books up there. I think that's a book of poetry I'm seeing up there. But definitely, your book that's coming out or should be out at this point at the time of publication. You want to tell us a little bit about this site and how people can get in touch with you if they want to follow up with any questions, or there's maybe 10-20% of the people that are listening right now who know exactly what you've been through, so maybe a way to get in touch with you.
Right. Either the contact form or either site will come directly to me, and so they can do that. They can email me at Rosenna B at talkingtreesurvivors.com. Now that's a lot to remember. So the easiest thing is to fill out the contact form on a Talking Trees site, and those come directly to my mailbox. So yeah.
All right. Well, perfect. Hey, well, for being on the program. And we should check in with you maybe in a year or so, because like I said, you have taken the leap. You've kind of jumped off the high dive into a pool that you're not sure has water in it. And you're going to see maybe in a year or two, if you got that funding going, if you're making some revenue for yourself, if your board's growing, if you have more followers. Like, I'd love to see how this develops, because it looks like you've taken the leap, and now it's time to
Yes.
kind of put those pieces together and develop this. So maybe in about a year or so, we'll reconnect.
Thank you. I appreciate your time so much. That's been great.